Namaskar, welcome to all our viewers to Spice Money Chaupal. This is an amazing conversation you're going to witness because we have with us two very accomplished leaders, Mr. Vikram Pandya and Mr. Shrikant Patil. I'll introduce you to both of them. But today's topic is something that there's been a lot of conversation around, the tech industry, which is AI, right? सब लोग एआई के बारे में बात करते हैं। एआई क्या है, एआई से क्या होने वाला है, क्या जिंदगियां बदलने वाली हैं। इट्स बीइंग कंपेयर्ड टू द स्टार्ट ऑफ इंटरनेट एंड हाउ इंटरनेट ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड एवरीथिंग टुडे। देयर इज नथिंग वी कैन इमेजिन विदाउट द इंटरनेट। इज देयर अ वर्ल्ड वी मूव्ड इनटू ऑलरेडी वेयर वी कैन इमेजिन नथिंग विदाउट एआई? हमारे कुछ दोस्त हैं जो कहते हैं कि दे टॉक टू चैट जीपीटी मोर देन दे टॉक टू देयर फैमिलीज। तो ये एआई का एक इम्पैक्ट अपनी डे टू डे लाइफ में लोग assume एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे हैं। आई डोंट नो वेदर दैट्स गुड और बैड। आई वुड रादर हैव पीपल टॉक टू देयर फैमिली देन टॉक टू अ मशीन, बट it is definitely solving for knowledge and solving for information and doing it in a very interactive way. So कुछ ना कुछ तो बहुत तेजी से बदल चुका है और बदल रहा है। जैसा आपको मालूम है, स्पाइस मनी इज वेरी मच वेस्टेड इन डीप रूरल इंडिया। हम 2.5 लाख गांव में प्रेजेंट हैं। 15 लाख के करीब छोटी दुकानें हमारे साथ जुड़ चुकी हैं हमारे स्पाइस मनी डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म पे, और 2.5 करोड़ कस्टमर्स को हर मंथ सर्व करते हैं विद रिस्पेक्ट टू बेसिक बैंकिंग एंड एडवांस फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज। हमारा गोल है कि ज्यादा से ज्यादा हम लोगों तक फॉर्मल लोन्स, फॉर्मल सेविंग प्रोडक्ट्स, फॉर्मल इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रोडक्ट्स और फॉर्मल इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट्स पहुंचाएं। उस दिशा में हम लोग जुड़े हुए हैं। कई और लोग हैं जो रूरल इंडिया में काम कर रहे हैं, और अब ये देखना है कि कैसे एआई रूरल इंडिया का शेप बदल सकती है। हाउ वी कैन यूज एआई टू ट्रांसफॉर्म रूरल इंडिया so that rural India contributes to the GDP growth. So with me present on this Spice Money Chaupal, we're kicking off today our first chapter on AI for rural. So excited, and I'm looking forward to the next 20 minutes of a very engaging conversation. Let me start by introducing to all of you Mr. Shrikant Patil. श्रीकांत जी एक कंपनी चला रहे हैं डिजी एली, उसके ये मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर एंड सीईओ हैं। इनका बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग बैकग्राउंड रहा है। इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियर हैं, एग्जीक्यूटिव एमबीए इन्होंने किया हुआ है एनसीआई सिंगापुर से। वेरी अकम्पलिश्ड इंडिविजुअल, टेक्नोलॉजी के क्षेत्र में इन्होंने बहुत सारा काम किया है। बट मोर इंटरेस्टिंगली पिछले 5 से 6 साल में जो अपनी कंपनी इन्होंने बनाई है डिजी एली, ये बहुत एक इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले कर रही है एआई को यूज करके। जो स्मॉल मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस हैं जो अभी शायद फॉर्मल फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज से डिप्राइव्ड हैं, उनको कैसे एआई के माध्यम से उनको डिस्कवर करके ये फॉर्मल एक्सेस टू क्रेडिट दिलवा रहे हैं, उसके बारे में हम इनसे सुनेंगे। तो श्रीकांत जी, वेलकम टू द शो सर, वेलकम टू स्पाइस मनी चौपाल। इंडीड अ प्लेजर टू हैव यू विद अस टुडे। ऑल्सो जॉइनिंग अस इज मिस्टर विक्रम पांड्या जी। विक्रम जी एसपी जैन स्कूल ऑफ ग्लोबल मैनेजमेंट के साथ हैं। आप लोग ने सब एसपी जैन स्कूल के बारे में सुना है, बहुत ही प्रसिद्ध संस्था है हमारे देश की। उसमें ये डायरेक्टर हैं फिनटेक एंड एआई इनिशिएटिव्स के। तो ये काफी कुछ रिसर्च में इनका इनका काम रहता है, और आई एम श्योर कि इनके काम से हम काफी कुछ सीख पाएंगे कि रिसर्च लेवल पे क्या क्या चीजें हो रही हैं, और आगे जाके इनको क्या लगता है कि क्या क्या चीजें हो सकती हैं। ये एक रिकॉग्नाइज थॉट लीडर हैं, इनको अवार्ड मिल चुके हैं महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट से एज एन सीए एजुकेटर ऑफ द ईयर। गडकरी जी ने इनको एक्नॉलेज किया है। तो हमारे साथ दो ऐसी हस्तियां हैं जो बहुत अर्जे से इस क्षेत्र में लगी हुई हैं। चलिए आज इनसे थोड़ा सा एआई को डीमिस्टिफाई करते हैं, एआई फॉर रूरल के बारे में बात करते हैं। तो श्रीकांत जी, कैन आई स्टार्ट विथ यू सर? रियली व्हाट वी वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड इज कि as we think about AI, थोड़ा सा can you demystify for our viewers what is AI and how do we think about it in the context of solving for unsolved problems, when it comes to underserved and unserved communities across the world? Over to you.
Well, thank you, and it is pleasure to be here, Dilip. And I guess you're doing some phenomenal work, and specifically, आप जो कर रहे हो, reaching out to people and then bringing these set of information for them. So, if I just make it very very simple for AI, we think about AI. Recently, most of the conversations have been about Gen AI. because Gen AI has taken generative AI has taken a lot of lead in this. But more importantly, we need to also understand that AI did not come in only when with Gen AI. It existed long time ago, like 30 years ago. We had artificial neural networks, we had machine learning models and all that. Now what is happening is across the world and across segments and across different type of, whether it's individual companies, lot of data has become available to us. I mean, the reason why we see the LLMs getting trained on some of these things, we see some of the controversies where, where did you get this data to train? And we hear that one model is now training on the other model, and all of that is largely about the availability of data. So I would say there is a huge open data revolution which has happened over the last 20-25 years. And that has led to AI is a result of that, right? Because now the data is available, it's accessible, verifiable, and all of that. I would break it into two segments. One is simple machine learning predictive modeling, which is basically you take any functionality and you ask AI to get trained with the data and with the outcome, and then AI is able to tell you. And there are different type of problems, classification problem and other things, but you essentially train the model to behave like human beings, right? So that's one part of it. And then the generative AI is where, and this is more about targeting, saying, I want to solve a specific problem, and how do I get to it? On the generative AI side, we look at creating something where, you want to write an article, you want to talk about a few broader, need more ideas, right? Somebody wants to have a health plan done on that, right? So there are so many opportunities on generative AI. For me, the real model which will be very powerful will be the hybrid AI model. It will not be just generative AI, not just the predictive AI, but the real solutions which will work is the entire, the complex, the composition of both in a hybrid AI model.
And Shrikant, if I could ask you, if you could talk a little bit about at DigiAlly, how are you using AI to solve for what?
Wonderful. So as I said, one of the things, I found out over the last few years is the expansion of data which is coming out for small medium enterprises. So if you think about the micro enterprises have a lot of challenges in getting the data. uh, the other end of it, which is corporates, have a lot of data which is available publicly. The mid-market segment, it is the small medium enterprises, is where a lot of data has become available over a period of time, right? And there's been very interesting paper written by Bank of England and also Bank of International Settlements, BIS, is about the asymmetry of data. Globally, there's $5.7 trillion of gap for the small medium enterprise lending, and in India it is 1.5 trillion. As we grow, the gap is not going to come down, and we cannot put more credit officers to solve that problem. So AI becomes essential for us. What we are doing is we are creating a digital twin of credit officers. We are creating digital twin of corporations. And these interactions, as I mentioned about the hybrid combination, which is we use machine learning at the core, wrapped by generative AI. And then there are some very interesting scenarios where we are now codifying the knowledge of the organization. So whatever the organization has learned through the credit officers is getting codified into the machine learning models or AI, and solving for this 1.5 trillion gap in India and $5.7 trillion gap across the world.
So, Shrikant, are you basically saying that today you're using AI to solve for the fact that if there is a credit officer in the traditional world who's doing underwriting on a small enterprise data, you're creating a digital twin of that credit officer, meaning that you're, instead of a human being looking at the data and doing a credit assessment, you're saying the machine is looking at the data and doing a credit assessment?
Yes, so we are actually working on a real avatar at this stage where you will be able to interact. So we are not saying that you have to replace the credit officer, but the credit officer will have an assistant, which is a replica of that, which is a digital twin. And the digital twin is trained to look into the data and create the in-depth behavioral patterns of corporations, of small, medium enterprises. And that behavioral pattern is what is reflected in the conversation between this avatar, AI avatar, and the credit officer. So, you talked about it earlier, right? People are talking to AI more than they talk to the family. The reason here, Dilip, is the whole human computer interaction is changing. The foundation of human computer interaction was like, look, give me fantastic, good looking screens, right? And I will be very happy to see the charts and work with those. Today, people don't want to see too many data points. They want to see the outcome. They want to see a recommendation. They want to see analysis. And with that, they want to ask questions, which are smart questions, to make sure that their judgment and their decision is accurate. We are going in that direction, that completely reimagining the human computer interaction, that you get to the result or decision very quickly, but at the same time we keep the flexibility for the credit officer to challenge the AI and make sure they understand there is an explainability dimension, so that the credit officer can make the decision. The decision still remains with the credit officer.
Yeah, I know, because I know the Nvidia CEO said that people are not going to lose jobs to AI. It's people who do not use AI will lose their jobs to people who use AI. And that's what I think you kind of refer to. So we'll come back on credit, Shrikant, because this is a very important subject. But Vikram, let me come back to you, sir. That, we are talking about AI for rural. Shrikant mentioned about data, right? That AI works on the back of data. So in all the research work that you've done, and in all the VC funding work you do, and in all the areas that you're now engaged in over the years, how do you see data of rural consumers and rural businesses, getting organized and becoming available for then LLMs and SLMs to get trained on the back of? So how do you see digitization of rural data?
So very good question, and let me start by just adding some context to it. Right. First of all, as we all know, AI is very good at increasing productivity and at a scale as well, which means that when we are talking about HNI client, where you require, let's say, a very personalized relationship, and you want that person to work with you on a very long time horizon, typically people will still value relationship over there, because that HNI is ready to pay that much amount to that relationship manager. So that even if you think about a company or corporate, large corporate, they will still value that relationship, and then you are not using AI to replace that kind of a relationship at all. But what happens is that when we talk about masses, when we talk about at a scale, when we talk about retail customer, and specifically, let's say, this sort of tier 2, 3 audience who may not have that sort of purchasing power, or let's say the payment that they can do to accept this sort of advice, right? And this is where the AI can be a game changer, because AI brings productivity, efficiency at a scale. These are the three critical things that we need to think about. And when we talk about AI, whether it is generative or predictive in nature, when we look at from the Indian villages or Indian tier 2, 3 cities, today you have around 10 different areas where it can be easily used. And why? Because you have huge amount of data available. And how that data can be used in first manner is that you have even structured and unstructured data. AI today is capable of digesting both. Interestingly, AI can digest both structured as well as unstructured data. So when we talk about unstructured data, it is not just that, okay, there is a chat data, for example, there is, when we talk about census data collection. So one part is structured, another part is unstructured. But even you can now marry this to data points with the help of data cleaning tools, right? So that is not an issue today. That is difficult to do, but doable. It is not impossible to do. So once that data cleaning is done, which is headache, but still it is to be done, because that is where the power of this analytics comes into picture, or training comes into picture. So when we talk about people ready to pay huge amount of money to get the data, which is good quality data, this is where I personally believe that India has both demographic, data, and diversity, all three, to really empower our own indigenous models to make a dent into this ecosystem. Unfortunately, we are not really doing much on that front, but thankfully, recently only Government of India has taken this initiative where certain startups are identified who will create this sort of Indianized model with the help of all this open data that we have. In fact, government itself has the open data portal, which many of you may not know. It is called data.gov.in, which is the government's official open data portal. And along with that, you have certain other verticals like Bhashini is for language. Then you have another vertical which is on the export import data and the commerce data. Like this, you have multiple vertical with the open data available, which ultimately gets funneled in to the government's own open data portal. Using that, people can really train amazing models, right? That is first part of it. So you may not want to just generate large language model on your own because, okay, you require huge investment. But even if you want to train small language model, which is capable of doing a very particular thing very well, then it can really unlock the huge amount of opportunities for India, right? So I think that is what we are currently looking at. We will try creating large language model if possible, but if not, we can always benefit out of the small language model as well. So hope that answers your question.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, Vikram. So basically, are you saying that the way we've seen the UPI revolution in India on the back of, the digital public infrastructure that the government has created, are you saying when it comes to using AI for empowering rural India, it starts with data? And therefore, is there already a lot of work that's happening in terms of capturing structured and unstructured data at the government end and being made available as a kind of an open data stack to people to build on the back of? You're saying it's already happening, or it's happened?
It has happened. It is there. So let's assume you have certain data which is already generated, kept, and it is getting generated on a daily basis, which is already there, right? Now we may figure out that, okay, let's assume government and RBI or a policymaker in general would like to decide that if I were to do certain policy related tweak, right? Whether it is fiscal policy or monetary policy, I may need to know from where certain sectors are contributing and how the money is moving, right? Now that is a traditional data analytics. There is nothing AI can do for you, right? Because it is a traditional data analytics. But now with this data, I can use models, generative AI model or predictive model, and then I can have a human-like conversation saying that, okay, can you identify the top 10 cities, right? That is the analytics that we normally do, top 10 cities, by just asking the NLP language. Right? So behind the scene, it can run whatever Python code is required to gather the data, analyze the data, and then give you the result. But it will ease the policymakers' role because policymakers are not technical savvy people, right? They know what they want to achieve. So as long as you isolate that technical part from that administrative part or administrative overload that people are today facing, you can really make wonders, right? So that is where people are already working. In fact, today you have so many different models available, even with the government entities, where they are able to predict certain areas that, okay, this area will have higher rainfall, so my policies should be different this year. So there are certain things which are happening, as we all know. But today, when we talk about non-government entities also, right, how they are helping uh, tier 2, 3 cities, there are two different initiatives which I would like to bring your attention to. One is about, you have, let's say, Amazon MTurk, which is in US, right? Which is typically where you have this micro task like label the data, do certain basic tagging of the data, right? Where human is very good, right? But that is required before you can train the model. So there are certain companies which are today helping this tier 2, 3 cities out to earn money by doing this micro task. And that is where additional data points are coming, which are not available with government. These data points are not available with the government. These are the data points which are getting captured and covered by these other entities who are able to bring this data into the mainstream pipeline.
So So Vikram and Shrikant, if we were to talk specifically about credit, okay, because let's talk about rural India, ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में, there are people who are trying to earn income. कोई दुकान चला रहा है, कोई खेत में काम कर रहा है, कोई गाय चारा से काम करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. There's MSME and agri sector in rural India. Now they want credit to grow. What are the options they have? They can take money from a local money lender. They can take money from family or friends. They can go to a bank and apply for a loan. They can download a digital lending app and apply for a loan. और आजकल जो बहुत ही पॉपुलर हो गया है कि दुकान में जो क्यूआर लगा है उसके डेटा के बैक पे जो सारी कंपनीज हैं उनको लोन दिलवा रही है उनके प्लेटफॉर्म पे. तो ये कुछ तरीके हैं उनको लोन मिलने के. अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि उनको कम से कम दाम में लोन चाहिए, जब चाहिए तब मिलना चाहिए, और थोड़ा फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी होनी चाहिए रीपेमेंट टर्म्स पे. तो हाउ वी कैन, अगर मैं लोकल मनी लेंडर को सोचूं तो वो उसका एक्चुअली अच्छा दोस्त है, बिकॉज उनको लगता है कि जब उसको उनको पैसा चाहिए वो मिल जाता है, हाई इंटरेस्ट रेट पे मिलता है, बट जब चाहिए मिल जाता है और अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड डेटा पे मिल जाता है. अब हम बात कर रहे हैं क्रिएटिंग अ डिजिटल ट्विन की, हम बात कर रहे हैं एआई की. तो क्या हम एक ऐसा सिस्टम बैठा सकते हैं कि आज जब किसी को रूरल इंडिया में लोन की जरूरत है, एक होता है इमरजेंसी पर्पस के लिए, चाहे हेल्थ या किसी चीज के लिए हो, या मोर इंपॉर्टेंटली प्रोडक्टिव पर्पस के लिए, इन्वेंट्री चाहिए, बिजनेस को ग्रो करने के लिए चाहिए, एक और कैटल फार्मिंग में अगर है तो एक और गाय खरीदने के लिए लोन चाहिए. तो ये सब चीजें अगर उनको चाहिए, कैन बी इन्विजन कि उन्होंने अपना फोन उठाया, एक नंबर मिलाया, अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट दी, और मशीन ने कहा हाँ जी हम आपको लोन ये दिलवा सकते हैं, ये चार चीजें हमें बताइए. उन्होंने बताई और लोन उनके बैंक अकाउंट में पहुंच गया. राइट, ऐसा हो सकता है. तो और इसको करने के लिए क्या चाहिए? तो मे बी Shrikant, let me come to you first. What do you think? Do you think we can envision a situation that a small farmer in a village of India can get loan on when he needs it, on terms that he needs it, from formal financial institutions at an affordable cost?
Wonderful. I think this is a very good setting. And, let me take a step back. If Philippines can do it, if Indonesia can do it, if, Thailand can do it, if Brazil can do it, there is no reason why India can't do it, right? So you see a lot of these revolution around the world where farmers or, micro enterprises, as you talked about, rural enterprises, they are coming under this span of credit worthiness, right? Now, few things which are very common across all of these. For example, take example of Philippines. Philippines GCash is one of the largest payment provider, right? Payment wallet. They have created their own score. Now, all of these which you talked about, the segments, they are all doing certain form of a payment, right? So converting your payment information into your credit information and capturing that credit worthiness is something what GCash is doing, right? There's a bank in Indonesia which is also building the score like that, right? China has multiple other similar solutions. So in simple terms, what AI can do, and to some extent, Vikram kind of pointed up public data, private data, and all of that stuff, right? While government is giving you a lot of data, you can analyze satellite imagery, right? You can look at some of the grading of crops, which AI can predict on, right? You can talk about this whole alternative data, which may be coming in, which Mudra also used, and what we hear around 43,000 crores of loans where AI assisted when they gave the loans. So it's perfectly possible. Precision farming is creating, further opportunities for them where the water used, what I hear from is 50% reduction in the water which is being used. Fertilizer costs are down 40% or something. So there are huge opportunities for us to tap into. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who could rely on this open data which is becoming available. A lot of things which were not humanly possible, right? NASA used analysis of the stars because there are billions of stars around us. So it's not possible by human eye to check those. So AI was used to analyze those. So, so many opportunities for us to build that platform. But what we need to start looking at is to go away from the traditional credit models. We do not want to rely on the same models, because even if there is an incremental change which comes in, we will not be able to justify, banks or financial institutions will not be able to justify. So to crack the rural problem, we have to think out of the box and start from first principles, rather than saying, look, here we are, and now let's try to modify this a little bit.
Because we have to be AI first, rather than building incrementally. We have to design fresh. So Vikram, can I come back to you, sir? That this idea of data, right? इन्होंने बात की about payment data, satellite data, crop data, मुद्रा की बात की, तो आपने बात की about data.gov.in. I know कि rural India में more than the private sector, the government is vested in that ecosystem. Public sector banks are vested in the ecosystem. तो जब बात प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग की आती है विक्रम, then how does this grow? Because the idea is that it should not be seen as just an obligation, but also as a commercial opportunity for financial institutions to lend and grow. तो एक है सरकार कह रही है पैसा दो, एक है उनको खुद लग रहा है कि एक अपॉर्चुनिटी है टू there's fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. तो इसको कैसे देखें, क्रेडिट फॉर रूरल कैसे देखें?
So आपने सही कहा, and this is what I also believe. Look, understand one thing very clearly, right? Credit is in a way right as well as responsibility, right? When we talk about from the lender as well as borrower perspective, I personally believe it should be difficult to get a loan and easy to repay. That is how it should be, so that you don't get those people who are just trying to get loan for the sake of it, right? When you don't have discipline and you take a loan, that is a recipe for disaster, even for you and for the economy, right? What Shrikant suggested, for example, earlier, is what we call as a proxy data. Certain data points are proxy data sets, right? So there is this startup called Data Sutram who collects, let's say, 250 plus data sources, which includes, let's say, your mobile tower pings, your satellite night data imagery, so that you can identify that which areas are growing. So that becomes kind of a proxy data. Then you have, let's say, footfall data, right? Where people are traveling more, where people are moving more. So all this proxy data set gives you certain idea about where the growth is happening or will happen further, right? And that gives you the idea about the opportunity. Now that just tells you that, okay, you may want to put more resources in identifying this sort of opportunity. But after that, you still need to go through the traditional process of identifying ability to pay and intent to pay, right? Those two things are cornerstone for any lending business, right? So based on these two idea, maybe you will charge higher interest or lower interest based on the segment and risk that you are dealing with. But ultimately, you will try to figure this out for sure. Now, how easy you can make it for your customer to share the data so that you can get comfort in underwriting that loan depends on how well you can consume the data and how well you are able to rely on that data analytics, right? That is where AI model can really differentiate between pricing power that you have, right? So let's say with the better quality of analytics, maybe you can now charge lower rate of interest to the same customer because you are able to figure out that, look, this risk is already structured or it is lower because you know better about that customer and locality and end use, right? Most of the time, it is proven also from the credit data that any credit tied to end use, for example, fertilizer purchase, or whether it is seed purchase, or whether it is related to mandi advance that you want to give, right? All those things. So even if you talk about any end use tied lending, that is proven to be the safest form of lending in this tier 2 3 cities, right? So when you are embedding that, when you are embedding with, let's say, warehouse receipt that you typically do as a financing, right? When you embed such products with the farming services that you are today having, right? Then it creates a good impact because now you are talking about what we call as a embedded lending. It is not about just going there and trying to sell someone where the metric is to increase number of loans that you give. Unfortunately, that results into what we call as a Goodhart's law, where your metric or measure itself is becoming target, and then it ceases to become the good measure itself. So unfortunately, if you do that, then there is a push that you are making without really a pull factor, which is that demand that you are looking towards, right? And people may missell, people may sell something which is to someone who is not able to pay. But here, when you are connecting it with end use, when you are embedding the lending itself, I think that is a huge opportunity which can be leveraged with AI, because AI can identify that, okay, in this value chain, in this value stream analysis mapping, these are the points which are value accretive. These are the places where if I embed this financing as a product, I can recover it. Because today you have digitally capable ecosystem who can collect and keep lien on the cash flow as well. That can be a game changer, because today you already have credit on UPI. Today you also have ability for you to have a routing mechanism in the payment itself, so that you don't need to really worry about the admin cost, right? All those things are available today as a pipeline. It is more about how well you are implementing it for that particular value chain where you want to embed, and that opportunity is still available for most of the players.
No, this is actually amazing. This is amazing what both Vikram, you and Shrikant are talking about, because the idea is that today we know that for MSME to contribute to GDP growth, they need credit and they need low cost credit. Second, we know that most of these MSMEs are in rural India, right? And we need to solve for it. But I think the big point, Vikram, that you're making is that you need to give credit when the person actually needs the credit. Point number one, because we've seen over leverage, we've seen over borrowing that's created stress in the microfinance sector, mainly in rural India. So because it's driven by a AUM mentality of pushing loans versus seeking demand, right? So point, very important point you made. And the second point you said is that, do you know, how do we embed credit into use cases? Because, you know, the regulator talks about exposure of credit to the rural household, not just to the individual. So the question is, how do you make sure that there is an end use in which it is embedded? And therefore, if we can figure out that what is the requirement for credit, and if given, how can it multiply income and therefore solve for repayment?
Correct. That is the idea. Correct.
This is amazing. This is amazing. I think this in itself is a like a workshop subject where I would love to have the two of you and whoever else is excited about solving for rural credit in a room where we can do a hackathon to solve this, right? Because I think definitely we have to get the large institutions on the table and figure out a way, because they have the lowest cost of funds, right? But give them the confidence that, you know, this model can work. So because generally people are chasing secured credit, but in rural India people don't have enough collateral to give, but they have cash flows, right? The question is, the local money lender is relying on the cash flows, or maybe it's just ability to understand the unstructured information which formal institutions do not have. But can this embedded finance model work where, like QR has started organizing payment data, right? Is there a way where we can organize other data and make unsecured work like secure? Because the question is that, secured credit is there. Maybe that's the answer to solve for, right? Like ghar hai, zameen hai, gold hai. Maybe those things can come together as a balance sheet financing for the individual and the business. But can we make sure that, we can do if that's not available, right? Can data be made available, which is data that you can rely on? So I think there's huge opportunity, and like you said, this is happening. So let me end by asking both of you that for entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs who are looking to build solutions like Shrikant is building, and Vikram, you are in the VC fund business, you understand, you're looking out for entrepreneurs, right? When someone thinks about rural India, right, and the the landscape of rural India, do you both see that there is opportunity to build? Because we see a concentration of fintechs in urban India. We've started calling ourselves a rural fintech, and it's become an exception, right? And people say, "Oh, are you doing impact work or are you doing for-profit work?" And we said you cannot create impact without money, right? And we are amongst the few fintechs in the industry who are actually making money for the last 5 years, right? Just working in the payment space. So we know the opportunity that there exists in rural India, not just to create impact, but to grow value and grow profit, right? So let me ask the two of you, right? Vikram, maybe I start with you, right? With all the research you've done and all your understanding about rural, working with governments and working with entrepreneurs, do you see money in rural?
Yes, there is. In fact, to give you an example, right? We put money exactly in that segment in two startups. One is called Metafin, another is Naudhan. And when we talk about these two companies, right? So let's look at what is that they are trying to replace. Naudhan is trying to replace that diesel generator with, let's say, solar power, where that diesel generator today, when you buy that and use that with maintenance cost and everything, when you are replacing that with solar, in fact, you are net accretive and then also saving money. So it is not no brainer for people to then go for this as a product, and then everything is managed properly because it is a net accretive. They don't mind paying it because otherwise it will get shut down and they are losing the benefit that they are getting. So when you create a product which in fact pays itself off, right, then of course there is this sort of positive feedback loop, as we discussed earlier also. That positive feedback loop is very useful for any such lending product, right? So now when we talk about that as one segment, that is one. Second segment is Naudhan is again, it includes LAP, it includes other products which are, let's say, not even without LAP. If you look at the other products which are not secure, right? But again, when you talk about this embedded credit, which I mentioned, right, when you are working with a startup, maybe who is dealing with this, I will give you one simple example: FPO in one village, right? FPO, if for the viewers who are not aware about that, it is a basically farmer producer organization, right? So that basically allows you to have a collective bargaining power for the small farmers. So when we talk about FPO in one village, right, like that you have so many small FPOs in different villages. This startup works with those FPO. They create FPO if that village is not having one for them. They help these people to collect the vegetables or fruits which are local to that area, and then they solve for the entire distribution part of it. So tier one cities and like large cities, they will figure out that how this distribution should happen. And because this is already connecting via this ecosystem, now you have the complete transparency on the data. And that is where this entire LSP model in the erstwhile RBI definition also, when you talk about it, right? Where if you have LSP like this under the OCAN, I'm sure you are aware about OCAN as well. So if you have this LSP model under OCAN, you have the data visibility for all these different players, and then it becomes much easier for you to underwrite, right? So as long as you create such models which are positive feedback loop generative, right, or guaranteed, then it is easier to make money. You have much lower risk. I will not say zero risk because nobody knows what may happen. But that risk is something which is systematic more in nature rather than unsystematic. So that is okay because anything can happen, right?
No, that's great, Vikram. Shrikant, can I close with you? Is there money in rural? If you give credit in rural, will you be able to collect it?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of alternative data sources which are coming up. But I want to, while we close, I want to also highlight the revolution which is happening in digital public infrastructure, where AI is coming in. Because all the entrepreneurs, they can't build everything on their own. They will have to rely on the backbone of TPI. And I'll give you three examples, right? One example is the whole Aadhaar finding duplicate accounts, where AI was used to find out, multiple crores of duplicate accounts were eliminated because of that. That's number one. RBI has a mechanism to use AI for identifying mule accounts, banking accounts, right? So these are the two examples. And today, just today, there is a news which is announced, as while we speak, is Sehmati, which is the whole consent layer of digital public infrastructure, is going to be powered by Google, because there are these transactions where transactions will have fraud, they will have a lot of other challenges, and Google is now going to help with its analytics because it has a lot of data about people on this. So you see that this whole investment of government coming by private sectors coming in, Google has another separate division which is managing the whole a billion users or something in India. So you definitely would see tremendous opportunity, but you need to build it with the public infrastructure. And then, as Vikram said, you have to identify specific models, which has already been done in many countries. Like China has also got group buying. So I mean, we don't need to reinvent everything. We could just look around and we will find so many examples. But this is the right time for us to implement AI in rural.
Well, wonderful. I think this is the right time, and it's a great way to end this conversation to say that जो मुझे आप दोनों से समझ में आया कि a lot has already happened. It's not happening, it's happened when it comes to organizing data in rural India, which means that data is becoming data assets are getting unlocked, whether it's farm data or non-farm data. All of this is going into machines, and machines are learning on the back of it, and it can come back and create a positive feedback loop and solve for formal products to enter rural India. Lots of learnings on this call. It seems like not just the government, but even a lot of startups have started vesting behind this, and there is value in doing this because, as we heard from both Shrikant and Vikram, there is money to be made. And therefore, whether it's VCs or private equity, at the end of the day, numbers matter. And we have a billion people living in rural India, and we have to leverage technology to solve for their challenges. Thank you so much, Vikram. Thank you, Shrikant. There's so much I've learned in this short conversation that we had with you. We want to continue to build awareness about the opportunities that exist in rural India for entrepreneurs in the tech space to kind of look at and build solutions for. With your inputs and thoughts that you've shared, I'm sure it'll inspire many others to build for it. Shrikant, I wish you all the best with your company, DigiAlly. Hope that you can continue to scale. And Vikram, with all the work that you do, thank you so much. It seems like you're so vested in this ecosystem. I'm sure together we can really transform rural India in a deep and big way. Thank you so much for your call. Namaskar. Thank you.